Welcome to Demystify Magic with Molly and Madison.
I'm Molly, a former skeptic turned full-time energy healer and teacher.
And I'm Madison, a born and raised witch running my family's crystal shop.
And we're here to explore all things woo through the lens of both science and spirituality so that you can find the moments of magic in your everyday life and create an intentional spiritual practice.
So if that's what you're into, find a cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's demystify some magic.
Hey,
Bestie.
howdy doody. We're back.
We are back.
Post solstice if you're listening to this when it comes out.
But full transparency, we are bulk recording today. We are taking a little break. Our editor is taking a little break. So we're like prepping for the holiday season right now. This is our third episode of the day. So
Which means it's going to be our silliest.
Who knows what you're going to get? I can't wait to find out. But today we are talking all things tarot and oracle. So if you are someone who has been wanting to read cards, has felt called towards tarot or oracle, but hasn't quite known where to start, how to choose, it's a super overwhelming process if you're going in blind. We are going to take you through our methods, how we choose our deck, our favorite decks, and how you can kind of figure out what is the right methodology for you. But first, Molly, what's your magic moment?
My magic moment is the other day, I've really been struggling with this time change. In Maine here, it starts to get dark around 3:30, 4 o'clock. So by 5 o'clock, it is nighttime. By 7 o'clock, it feels like midnight to me. And in my 30s, I've officially switched from a night owl to a morning person. I used to be someone who could stay up all night. I cannot. I don't like to leave my house once it's dark. So I've really been struggling. And so the other day I was invited to a friend's birthday party, not birthday party is what he calls it. And I wanted to go, but I didn't want to go, you know, like I wanted to be there, but I didn't want to leave my house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really had to rally myself to go. Like I made the mistake of sitting down to watch the Great British Bake Off finale before leaving. And then I was like, oh, it'd be so easy to just stay on the couch with my dogs.
A classic mistake. A tale as old as time.
I know. Really my daily struggle. So I go and I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay for like an hour, make an appearance, and then leave. Fully just like really have to motivate myself to go. And then I get there and I have so much fun. He does this thing. He's so funny. He's like this quirky dude. I know him through theater. And he gives out gifts on his not birthday party. So he is an avid Goodwill by the pound person, and he will collect weird things all year and then wrap them up and hand them out at this party. And I forgot about this. And so I'm sitting there and like, I love unwrapping presents. I don't even care what they are. And so I'm sitting there unwrapping like, you know, one thing was like witch's fingers from like the Halloween store. And then I got a 2.5 foot long plastic ear. And then I got a shirt that I'm pretty sure will fit one of my dogs that says I'm actually a mermaid. Like weird stuff. And it was so much fun. I could have done it all night. And then because like a lot of my theater friends are twice my age or older, which I love because I always feel like I'm such an old soul at heart. The party wrapped up by 8:30. I was like, oh, the dream. I was in bed by 9. It was great. It was so much fun. But it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, I really had to rally myself. And I'm so glad I did because it was such a fun night. Like Justin and I got like French fries on the way home and I got my peppermint mocha and we just like, it was so fun. It was super fun. So yeah, I'm glad I went. That was my magic moment.
Hearing that story, like the progression of it in real time was such a joy of you being like, bestie, I've really got to rally. Like, I know it's going to be a fun time. I love my friend. I don't want to bail, but I also don't want to move in this exact moment. And then to the end of it being like, this was the best.
So fun. The back of my car is filled with so much random shit right now.
I love it. I love it so much. I will need a picture of whichever boy fits in that little t-shirt.
The shirt.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I will let you know. What was your magic moment?
I had a very similar one where a situation that I was anxious to be in ended up to be wonderful and full of magic, and really serendipitous. So we do a workshop around this time of year in the store. We call it like a make and take workshop, where it's just like we set up a bunch of stuff and you can make as many handmade gifts as you want or need. We're just like there all afternoon. We have the stuff. It's pretty self-led. It's like very easy to do for everyone involved. But this might surprise you. shocker, LOL, just kidding. I am a little bit of an introverted human being, and I struggle to be in charge of a workshop. Even the most lowest of pressure workshops that we could possibly do.
See, that doesn't surprise me because I know you and we've talked about this, but it does surprise me because you are so good at it and you are such a natural like speaker. I feel like people listening are going to be like, what? That does surprise me.
Which is so wild because I don't see myself that way. Truly, every time we record a podcast, we stop recording and I'm fully prepared for you to be like, Madison, we got to do that over. It like every time.
Never.
I really feel like I struggle in a public speaking setting. And this wasn't even public speaking, but regardless. Okay. So my mom and I lead this workshop together. It's great. My mom usually does the intro. I help out with like the questions. We do like a candle topping where we do like usually a larger spell candle workshop where like you blend your oil, you pour your candle, you top it, et cetera, et cetera. To make it a little bit shorter, easier, and less expensive, we pre-pour these little 8-ounce candles. They're literally just our spell candles, but you can top them however you want. And then we do like a ritual bath and an oil roller, and you can kind of choose and you can make as many as you want, yada yada. My mom had a last minute appointment come up that she had to leave for the last hour of the workshop. And so I love doing the workshops. I have so much fun. I really love helping people like create something. You know, I get to do the part usually that I feel like suits my strengths, which is the witchy part. But I knew for the last hour of this workshop, also important of like, it's a walk-in event. Like we have RSVPs, but we set everything up and just like open the doors to the back room where we do our workshops and just say, come on in, guys. And so I knew we had one reservation for that last, like around that time. And again, it's just like, so we can kind of know who's coming. But like the morning was really front loaded, like a flood of people come in, do everything. And then it kind of slows down. As we're approaching the end, we went from 12 to 4. My mom had to leave at 3 o'clock. And all day I'm dreading this 60 minutes time span, right? I'm like, it's going to immediately get busy. Like I'm going to freak out. I'm not going to know how to explain what we're doing. I'm going to like, it's going to go horribly and everyone's going to have a horrible time and I'm going to do a bad job. And what ends up happening is the one person who RSVP'd shows up a little bit early, sits, makes a candle, decides to make another, and then is making an oil roller. And I'm like, luckily she came early. So my mom did the explanation of what was going on, you know, explained the stations, did the hard part. And then my mom leaves and it's just me and this older woman. I don't know how, like, she didn't tell me how old she was. That would have been, I don't know. But she was probably in her 50s or 60s. She was definitely like around my mom's age. We like, spoiler alert, we got to talking. She had daughters in their 30s. So obviously older than me. And I'm standing there in silence, not knowing what to say. I also really struggle with small talk. Anyone who's like come to the store and has met me in person, this is my blanket apology. I'm not good at talking to strangers. I never know what to say.
It's not true. It's not true.
I feel like I'm very awkward.
You feel like you're not good at it, but everyone else loves you.
Well, if you've met me and you left thinking, wow, she's really awkward, just know that I know. But I'm standing there like ruminating in that feeling of like, oh God,
yeah,
I have to talk. What do I say? What do I say? And I don't even actually know how we ended up in this conversation, but like she stayed the whole hour and just sat and we talked. And we talked about her daughters and she told me like what she was making the things for and she sat and meditated with them. And we ended up actually, so she is from London. She lived in London for 32 years. She just moved to Florida from London and was talking about like that experience of, you know, it's a big culture change where she lives is it's not exactly London over here. But back in 2019, I had an internship. I lived and worked in London for 3 months and it was the best experience of my life. And we ended up talking about that. Like she was talking about something of like where her daughter lived, something along those lines. And I was like, oh, actually, I was there for 3 months. Like, I know what you're talking about. You know, I had an internship there. My claim to fame is that if COVID hadn't happened, I would live in London and my life would be vastly, vastly different because I was supposed to move for a job. But that's another story for another day. But I was telling her about that experience. And it turns out this woman lived a block away from me.
Spooky.
When I was in London, we were talking, like she was talking about her train station by her house. And I was like, that's the train station by where I was staying. And she was like, what do you mean? It just like lost our marbles. She ended up like, she's showing me her gorgeous artwork. She's a painter. She's doing these beautiful paintings. She's showing me about like contacting galleries nearby. I'm pulling up galleries like in St. Pete. I'm like, you should go here. She's extremely, I'm showing her, I've gotten recently into stained glass TikTok. And so I made a stained glass piece the other week because of course my mom a few years ago got really into stained glass and bought all the materials and touches it once every 6 months or so. And so I'm like, look what I made. And she's like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And I was like, that's okay. You're lying. I know you're lying. As you're this immensely talented artist. And we just had such a great time. And it was such a lovely reminder of in the moments when I feel so afraid to be somewhere, it's when I need to be there the most, you know, when I feel the most resistance to an experience, it's when I need to experience it the most. And I just know that if my mom had been there, I would have said to myself like, oh, that's my mom's peer. And they would have talked and they would, you know, and it would have been fine. And I'm sure it would have been a lovely conversation, but it wouldn't have ended with the two of us hugging.
Yeah.
And crying at the end of the day.
You know what's spooky?
What?
I just realized both our magic moments happened on the same day.
That is spooky.
I know. And both very similar themes.
That's true. Oh my God. Weird.
Yeah. So weird.
I love when we both need to learn the same lesson at the same time. All right.
Because I remember I left the party and I had a voice note from you that was like, bestie, I just had a magic moment. And I responded, me too.
I do. Oh my God. I remember that. Oh, wow. Okay. That's wild.
That's so wild.
All right. Let's get started.
So a couple of episodes ago in our Q&A, we talked about the difference between tarot and oracle decks. And there was a couple of questions about how to get started with tarot. We figured we would springboard off of that episode into a deeper dive. So if you have questions about like, what is a tarot deck? What is an oracle deck? Definitely check that Q&A episode out because we go deeper into it. But today we wanted to talk through some of our favorites, how you can choose a deck, and then ways that you can work with that deck and get to know it. Whether you are someone like me who feels very new to tarot and feels very beginner at using cards, or someone like Madison who is, in my opinion, an expert.
Aw. Yeah, I guess as you were talking, I was thinking back of like, when did I get my first tarot deck? And I think I was maybe 15 or 16.
I know the exact moment I got mine.
Really? Tell me.
Okay, so in 2018, I was in an intuitive mentorship because this was when it was like right after my Reiki 2 training. I had just started doing Reiki for other humans and had started to feel my intuition coming to the forefront, and I really wanted to expand it. And so I did this intuitive mentorship, and I had wanted to explore tarot, but I really didn't know where to start. The mentor that I was working with, she recommended that I read this book about the Akashic records. And I read it, and I, read it cover to cover, memorized it basically because that's who I am. And I was like, this is too woo for me. Because remember, if you've been with us for a while, 2018 I was like 1 foot out of skepticism. The other foot was still firmly planted.
Firmly planted.
And I was like, this Akashic record things is too woo for me. And if you're not familiar with the Akashic records, the idea is basically that it is this record of energy or light that you can tap into, and basically all of history has been stored there. And so you have an Akashic record. It's basically like, think of it like a library of everything that's ever happened in your life. And so you have an Akashic record, your pets have an Akashic record, your house has an Akashic record, your business, etc. So I read this book, and something about it called to me, but I was like, I can't get on board with anything about it, so I don't know why I feel drawn to this book. Well, I tell her this, and she's like, that's fine. Just, put it on the shelf. Maybe one day it will resonate with you. Great. I go to my favorite crystal shop right after that meeting, and I go to browse like their tarot decks. And the one that jumps out at me is the Akashic Tarot. And I go, so interesting. So that's the first deck that I bought. And I still feel like most connected to that deck. Like that's the one that I can pick up the card and I don't even have to look in the book. Like what comes to me is usually what's written in the book. It's so interesting. And so that's the one that I use for like my business, my spiritual practice, kind of like my life. Whenever I feel stuck, that's the one that I reach for.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing all of the different ways that like the universe was never going to let you stay a skeptic. Like,
I know.
no matter what avenue it took, you were going to be spiritually awakened.
I know. The best part is like 2 years ago when I started working with the Akashic Records, and I'm like, oh.
Now I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. Yep. I was definitely one of those kids that like, I don't even know if they still have them, but like in a Barnes and Noble where there would be a box and it would be a package of a book about tarot and a tarot deck.
Ooh.
And I would lust after them. I would just stare at them. And I knew even in my kid brain, I was like, oh, I think that this is maybe something you're not supposed to have. Like it's like a taboo. Because this was definitely before I was really a part of my mom's spiritual practice. I was observing her spiritual practice. This was probably when I was like 7 to 9. I remember looking at those boxes and be like, one day I'm going to have that and I am going to pour over this book and I'm going to learn everything and I'm going to be a psychic. Which is so funny looking back. I'm like, yeah, you did. Good job. But my first deck, now I'm gaslighting myself. I don't know how old I was, but it was Christmas. And I had never mentioned that to my mom. I'm sure she like noticed me as a small child staring at the box.
Yeah.
But I was definitely a teenager. And she got me the Wild Unknown Tarot my mom did for Christmas, which it was like in peak popularity. Like it had just come out. I'm actually going to Google what year it came out so I can know because it's going to drive me crazy.
You know what's wild? The Wild Unknown Animal Spirit Oracle deck was my first Oracle deck.
Oh my God, really? Okay.
Yeah.
It was published in 2012.
Okay.
So I was 15.
Yeah.
I turned 15 that Christmas. So it was that year, I believe. It was either I was 15 or 16. It was like right in the height of its popularity. My mom was like, I don't know why, but I really felt like you needed this deck. And through like high school, probably in middle school maybe, is when my mom started pulling cards for me. And she never worked with tarot. She had this one specific oracle deck that's name escapes me now. But she would pull them for me. And it was even to the point where my best friend, Jeff, he would text me and he would say, can your mom pull me a card when we were in high school? And so even with her like having no real experience in tarot, got me this deck and was like, I really think that I needed to get this for you. And I played with it for a little while, put it away, probably didn't touch it for a couple years, honestly. Didn't know how to read it, really. And then a few years later, was talking to my mom about that experience, messing with all of her decks. My mom is a chronic deck collector and will not touch them. Like loves to have them, loves to look at them, but will go to maybe 2 decks total. And so she has this huge box and I'm just like going through and messing with her cards, pulling cards. And I pull up her Rider-Waite-Smith deck and I say something about how I feel really connected to that imagery and I don't know why. And I haven't always wanted it because I always feel like I want like a really cool abstract deck and this feels so basic.
Yeah.
And so I always try to like force myself to get the really cool, interesting decks. But that's what the Wild Unknown Tarot is. It's really gorgeous. It's really illustrative, but the imagery doesn't connect as much in the message for me. Like it was hard for me to learn that way. And in the past, I think I've said that I really only know tarot from an imagery perspective. Like if you ask me what a card means based on the name, I have to think of it. But when I see the picture, it's like instant opening of the channel.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard for me to learn when I was trying to learn the names, going through the guidebook of the Wild Unknown Tarot, because I was trying to learn based on words because the imagery wasn't connecting for me, which is the worst because it's such a beautiful deck that I love so much. But my mom was like, oh, that's really funny because I feel so disconnected from my Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Like you should just take it and see what happens. And I never looked back. I have been in love with this deck. I've been in love with tarot ever since.
I love that. Can we dispel a myth right off the bat?
Please do.
I hear this from people. I don't know where this myth started. Maybe you do. But I hear people say that you can't buy your own tarot deck. You have to be gifted a deck in a bag of silk. I
have no idea where I have never heard the bag of silk. I've only ever heard that decks have to be gifted to you. I have no idea where it came from, and I will dispel it immediately. I buy decks for myself all the time, too often maybe.
Same.
And I've never had an issue with the reading. It's all good. Buy yourself a deck.
Yeah. I was just thinking because you just mentioned 2 decks that were gifted to you, and the only one that's ever been gifted to me is the animal spirit deck, which is in my list of favorites. And it came to me like 2 years before. This was like 2016. So I am obsessed with the meditation app Calm. My vision board is to do a meditation collab with them one day. So put that out there into the universe.
Keep your eyes peeled for it. Coming to a Calm app near you. I just know it.
Yeah, I've used that app since 2016 religiously. And I've also been a volunteer moderator in their Facebook group since like 2017. And one year for the holidays, they sent us these animal spirit decks. And it was the first deck I ever had. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's very cool and I like it. And that was actually the deck I had before the Akashic Tarot.
That's very sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a myth until after I had already been gifted my first deck. I had never heard it before.
Yeah, just throw it out the window.
Yeah,
if you have heard it.
I mean, if it's a belief system that you want to hold, sure, go for it. Like,
if that helps you not spend your entire paycheck on tarot decks,
I was going to say,
by all means,
you should tell the people in your life that you can't buy your own tarot deck.
Yeah.
This Christmas season, say, oh, I love this deck, but just, you can't buy your own deck. It's got to be given to you for Christmas by your best friend, Yeah. Everyone knows that. It's written in the rule book.
Yeah. But I honestly think that the thing that both of our stories have in common with finding the deck that we finally connected with was really leaning into which one felt right. Which, if you're like, what the hell? How do I even know that? Go back to our intuition series, listen to the one on clairsentience and claircognizance, specifically the practice I share at the end about the bookstore, because that is how I choose decks now, is I look at the imagery first and I see which one calls to me, and then I just trust my gut. Yeah. And I trust that if the same deck keeps coming up over and over and over again, there's a reason. Like the one, I just got the Season of the Witch Yule Oracle by Juliet Diaz and Lorraine Anderson. And that one kept coming up. Like when we did our Q&A episode, we did a post about asking people to write in the comments their favorite decks. And this one came up over and over and over and over again. And I kept having people recommend it. And I was like, fine, I'll get it. It's the most gorgeous deck I've ever seen.
It is beautiful.
I love it so much. It's beautiful. It's like, look at these gilded green edges.
I'm going to have to order it.
I realized when I looked at the back of it that I knew this imagery from the back. I don't know where I knew it from, but I was like, wow, I've seen that before.
Oh, really?
I've never seen this deck before. I don't know.
I'm
obsessed with it.
Spooky. I love that.
I know. So I think like instead of going for the deck that people think you quote unquote should get, or, I know people say the Rider-Waite Smith is the quote unquote ultimate starter deck. I never resonated with it. I have that deck. I never use it because it just doesn't call to me. It doesn't resonate with me. I don't like the images. I don't want to look at them.
Yeah.
Like I don't, versus this one, the Yule Oracle, that I'm just like mesmerized by it.
Yeah, I think that is, and it's funny, the first deck I was gifted was that exact experience of, I do have such a connection to that deck because it is so nostalgic, but it is also, that's the double-edged sword of being gifted a deck, is that it's somebody else's intuition or somebody else's want or desire or, whatever they're putting onto the gift, whatever that gift means to them. Rather than like what you are called to, which I think it had to happen that way with my mom because I was in such a phase of life, that childlike wonder of wanting to be different and special so bad, I think is really what it was. That fades in your teenage years, or it did for me. It was very much, I want to fit in. I want to be like everybody else. I want to be normal. I want to be liked. That weirdness had to be put back in me. I had to be curious again. Yeah. And so it does always, it played out exactly the way that it needed to play out. But that's just another reason that I think that the idea that you have to be gifted a deck is kind of silly, because so much of my practice is working with decks that call to me. Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about how to connect with a deck.
Ooh, yeah, let's talk about that.
Because that's something that I think is also an important piece. Your intuition has called you to a deck.
I feel like this is going to be one of those situations where I'm going to learn from you and you're going to learn from me, because I feel like we've never talked about this, you and I.
I know.
But I know that we both have our own methods of connecting to them. So I'm excited.
Mine is very silly and very, very simple.
I can't wait.
But I think there's a lot of pressure too when your intuition is tied to something to have it be, okay, my intuition called me to this deck. Now I have to have this profound connection with this thing. And so I guess I just want to talk a little bit about what I do when I bring a new deck into the home, period.
Yeah.
Great. Especially now that a lot of decks are really mass market. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Target, The accessibility is very different, and that means that the decks are in a lot of hands, which is the same as any other thing, that we talk about in a spiritual practice. They had to be in a lot of different spaces to come to you. And so when I get a new deck, I will usually cleanse it when I remember to. Shamefully looks down.
I have my favorite method. I don't remember where I learned this, but this is what I do. So I have two forms of cleansing for decks. I do my deep cleanse, which is either a bell or a smoke cleanse. And then I do my quick and dirty cleanse, which is just you knock on it.
I knock every time. Knock is always for me before a reading. A new deck always gets a good smoke cleanse.
Yeah.
But then I let the deck sleep in bed with me for a few nights.
Oh, cute. Under your pillow? In the box or out of the box? Under the bed?
So many questions. Not under the bed. In the box. Not like free ball and all the cards all around.
Okay.
So
you snuggle it, or do you just rest it next to you?
I will usually just rest it next to me or put it under my pillow. And I actually learned this by accident because that very same Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I will joke that it is the deck that I have no boundaries with. Like it will just go for it. It will tell me what I need to hear. There are no frills. There's no sugarcoating. And that's because when I must have been in college when I got it. And I was going through a rough time, undiagnosed ADHD. I struggled a lot from the ages of like 18 to 21. That was like a not so great time. And in a bout of depression, I'll just call it what it is. In a bout of depression, I did not clean my room for several months, and that deck stayed under my pillow for who knows how long, like months and months and months. And we got real close.
Yeah.
And I pulled it out from the recesses of my bed mess and started using it. And there was a closeness that cannot be denied.
Yeah.
And so now that's just what I do with all of my decks. I'll either put them on my nightstand, or I'll literally just like put them next to me in my bed and sleep next to them for a couple days to like a week. And it doesn't have to be like all at once. It can be, you can break it up, whatever. But
sure,
having it close to me, for me, sleep is when I receive a lot of information as well. It's like when I feel the most open, like even nighttime in general. And so I receive a lot of information in my dreams. That feels like a period where I am most psychically activated.
Interesting.
And I think that's where it comes from. Also, I think it's just like a level of intimacy. Really, I just treat my decks like people in like a very strange way.
Just sleep with them and you get closer.
Yep. Ain't those the facts of life? But it's just time together. And I think that's the easiest way to create that time is it's a block that I'm not doing anything else, and creating closeness in that way, even if it's just like putting it in your purse, putting it in your backpack, carrying it with you throughout the day, enmeshing your energy in that sort of way.
Yeah.
Has been really helpful for me in establishing a connection because, I'll pull a couple cards first, and that's a kind of like a get to know you situation for the deck for me. And then I allow, okay, like I got to know you a little bit. Now you get to know me, and now we can work together.
It's so interesting because I've never done any of those things with a deck.
I'm going to send you a deck. We're going to break the rules. I'm going to send you a deck. I'm going to gift you a deck, and I need you to put it under your pillow for a week.
Damn. Okay. I do have a Reiki healer that I see pretty regularly who during the session, she'll lay cards under the table and then she'll have me pull a card at the end. And I love that. I love that practice.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I like that. For me, I receive most psychic information when I'm awake, which is so interesting how we're yin and yanging this.
Yeah.
So for me, I am most connected to my psychic abilities, intuition, whatever, when I am channeling Reiki for other people, just because I'm so out of my head. I'm so in the present moment. Even my physical body, my posture changes. So when I'm getting to know a deck, I leave it on my desk for weeks to months. And I will just have it sitting there, usually I have 2 crystals that I use to ground my energy before every session. And depending on like what type of session it is, they're both types of clear quartz. One is a Lemurian seed and the other one's just a clear quartz point. But I will leave those on top of the deck. Mm-hmm. And so when I go to start my session, I will ground my energy with my crystal, and then I'll put it back on the deck. And then eventually, after like a week or so, I might start pulling a card for the person as I connect with them before they come into the virtual space for the session, or I'll pull a card for myself or whatever. I'll just start pulling one card at a time. And that's how I connect with them. There are some decks, like the Akashic Tarot never leaves my desk. I don't know where the box for that is.
Yeah.
And I don't care because it never leaves my desk because it's always here. But when I get a new deck, typically I will pull a card and that will be like for the day or for the week. And I'll just have it up, like leaned against my computer screen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've never taken one on the road. I'm like, damn, I could put one in my purse. I never thought of that.
I very rarely, like if I'm traveling, I will not travel without a deck.
You bring a deck when you travel?
Mm-hmm. I think it started probably, so one of my best friends in the world lives in Atlanta. And I always read for her when I go to visit. And one time I forgot, I didn't have a deck with me, and she bought me one. It was very sweet. It's one of the only other person who's gifted me a deck other than my mom. And it's one of my favorite decks now to this day. It's like what I use almost exclusively when I read for other people. And so now I'm just like always ready. And I think it's just that because I go to Atlanta a lot, those friends had a baby. I'm like, my goal is to be favorite auntie. So I take that very seriously. I go to Atlanta a lot. And so now it's just in my travel routine to bring a deck. Even if I have no intention for reading for anyone, you know, what if I need it? I don't know. What if I need some guidance? Wow. I'm like I stay very prepared in that realm.
See, I'm one of those people, and like this is definitely a rabbit hole that we could talk about another time, but I don't understand, you know, those what's in my bag videos? Mm-hmm. I never understand them because for me, I never use anything that's in my purse, except for my oil rollers and my wallet. The rest is just like, and my Pepto-Bismol. The rest is just like a black hole.
Serenity
the rest
oil,
is a black hole.
Pepto-Bismol.
I'm like someone that I'm like, if I have a hand lotion, I'm never going to use it because there's one in my car. I'll just use the one in my car. So for me, the idea of like carrying a deck around never even crossed my mind because I'm like, why would I ever need that outside of my house?
That's so funny. I don't even really know.
But now I'm going to put one in my bag.
Yeah, I just like very rarely do I need it when I'm not expecting to.
But would be so fun. You get to an appointment early, you're sitting in your car, you're like, just pull a card. Why not?
Exactly. It's a great thing to, if you're interested in learning about tarot,
yeah,
take it with you and make it a part of, you know, if there's a moment when you would just be scrolling on TikTok, pull out your deck.
Just pull a card.
Yeah, pull a card and read about it, learn about it, meditate on it.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Because I'm thinking back to like when I was first learning tarot, I was working at a retirement community and I had a very busy schedule. I had zero time for myself. I was so tired all the time, but I was forced to take a lunch break and I would just sit in my car and just like piddle. Mm-hmm. Like that would be the perfect time to just like pull a card for myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, genius. Mm-hmm. And then I also want to echo something that you said that you didn't explicitly say, but we're going to explicitly say it. If you're wondering, why would I need multiple decks? The answer is you don't. Mm-hmm. They are fun to have. But for some of us, we prefer to have certain decks for certain purposes. So you said you have a deck that you almost exclusively use when you're reading for other people.
Yes.
I have one that I almost exclusively use only for reading for myself.
Mm-hmm. I do too. So my Rider-Waite-Smith, I will use that to read for myself and for people very close to me. Like when I did that reading for you a few weeks ago, I used my Rider-Waite-Smith deck. If I read for my mom or my friends, I'll pull from that deck. But for when I do all of our collective readings, I use a different deck. I even have a deck, we were talking about this earlier because we were pulling decks that we wanted to talk about, and I had pulled 8. and I had to narrow down my list.
Should we just go through our decks and say what we use them for?
Yeah, let's do that. That's a really great idea.
Let's do that. Okay. Want to go back and forth?
Yeah, sure. I'll start since I have more. Okay, so let's go through and we'll link all of these decks in the show notes. I'll have a page put together of all of our favorites that if you want to see the imagery that we're talking about, you can go through as we talk about them. But I'll start with the one that I just said, I guess. The Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the classic generic, if you think of a tarot deck, this is probably the image in your mind. That's the deck that I use exclusively for myself, the people closest to me, and the situations closest to me.
The Akashic Tarot, for me, this is the only tarot deck in my list. I just realized all the rest that I picked are Oracle decks. I think I only own this tarot deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith.
Oh, that's so fun. Interesting.
Yeah, and I never use the Rider-Waite-Smith. I always use the Akashic Tarot. So that's the one that I use anytime I'm doing readings for my business or my spiritual practice, because those are very much linked, or my personal journey. I have been pulling cards from it for other people, but I generally use it just for myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the deck that I mentioned that I use for our collective readings that I do for the podcast, or if you are on the Healing Hedge Witch text list, you know that you get a text every month on the full and new moon with a 1-card reading. I do those readings, and they're from this deck. It's the Morgan Greer Tarot that my sweet, lovely friend Bridget bought for me at least 5 or 6 years ago. The box is deteriorated. It's in this old, weird little bag that has a Healing Hedge Witch stamp on it. I have no idea. I don't even know.
Cute.
We've never had this stamp. Like, I have no idea where this stamp came from. We don't have stamps with our logo on it. No clue. It just, this bag has been here for who knows how long.
Wow. So my next deck is actually my newest, which we talked about in one of the Winter Solstice episodes, but is the Season of the Witch Yule Oracle by Lorraine Anderson and Juliet Diaz. I'm obsessed with this. I know that they have a couple of other decks. They have one for like every Wheel of the Year moment, holiday. I don't know. I will be collecting them all, but this is the one that I've been using most often when reading for other people. When I do my full body energy readings, typically I channel based on the energy that I'm feeling. So I don't tend to pull cards to read the energy. I tend to just tap in energetically and read what I'm feeling and seeing. But I will pull a card at the end typically, and it will be, for the most part, recently it's been from this deck, and I really love it. I love the imagery on it. I also love how, like, there's a little sentence at the bottom of the cards, but it doesn't dictate how you should read the cards. You know how some of them are like, you know, this one's for hope or whatever. There's sort of like little poems, and then you can interpret those based on the energy you're feeling, which I really like because it helps me have something to hold on to, because I don't feel like super established in my readings with cards. Mm-hmm. But it's not so much that it's like blindsiding my intuition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like something that you can kind of work with rather than have to make something fit. You know?
Yeah, because I think the reason that I struggle with Rider-Waite Tarot is because I'm not a visual person. Mm-hmm. I'm not a visual learner. I'm not a visual, like when I imagine something, I hear words more than I see pictures. Mm-hmm. And so the Akashic Tarot has very clear descriptions of each card. It's like, you know, follow the path or whatever. Mm-hmm. Autumn and summer is one, or like Archangel Gabriel, you know, like they're very clear messages. And this one is the same way. But the Rider-Waite is just like 3 of Cups. And I'm like, you're going to be really thirsty. I don't know. You know?
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, those are really the only 2 for my list that are tarot decks that I use. I do have an honorable mention. I'll throw it in here. Something that I think is silly. Like, if you're thinking about how to choose what decks you might need for what purpose, or if you're wondering what we might mean by that, just know that you can mean absolutely anything, because I have a deck that I exclusively used while I was dating. While I was on the dating apps, I would use the Lover's Path Tarot by Chris Walder. And it's a deck that I bought years and years ago when I was in a phase of feeling like, oh, I need to have a million decks. That's like what makes you a tarot reader. And then I bought a bunch of decks that I didn't connect with, and then they just sat. And one day I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is a really great vibe check before I go on a Hinge date.
Yeah.
And that's what this deck has been used for. And now that I'm no longer on the dating apps, it has not been touched since.
I love that.
So it's also okay for a deck to like have run its course. I think that's an important thing to mention too, of like, if you have had a connection with a deck and you feel that feelings start to kind of go away if your readings aren't resonating as much, nothing's wrong with you. I see decks really as like spiritual beings in their own way, which that might be a little woo for some of you, but I really do experience a personality with a deck.
Yeah, I was going to say they have a personality.
Yeah, and so I don't know if it's that certain guides come through with certain decks and that's what that is, or if it's different aspects of myself that come out with different decks. But I do experience a real shift in energy depending on what I use. And sometimes, like all relationships, there are natural conclusions.
Yeah.
And so that's okay too.
Yeah. My next deck I have talked about before. It's the Britney Spears Oracle. Who is this by?
We know her, we love her.
Oh, Kara Nesvig, illustrated by Helen Green. I'm obsessed with it. This is my light readings deck. You know, like it's not my Dark Nights of the Soul deck. It's the deck for when I am feeling a stupid resistance that I know I can push through and I just need Britney's help. This is for when Madison's at the casino and asked me to pull a card to help her find the right slot machine.
I did famously do that once.
This is for the times where I feel stuck, but not stuck in the yuck, you know? This is very much like when I need to bring levity to my practice, which for me is most of the time. I tend to approach my life with equal parts light and dark. And so I tend to use the Britney deck when I feel myself I'm like too much in the weeds of the dark and I need to stay light. Or if it's a problem that's like pretty light, where I'm like, I really don't know what to eat for lunch, I'll pull a card from Britney. Or I really don't know how I should rearrange my living room. You know, I'll pull a card from Britney. I don't know, whatever. Like very light issues that are still important. And I also think that it's really powerful to do a practice like this for those lighter issues, those quote unquote less meaningful issues, because then that's how you build trust for the bigger ones. Like I'm just thinking of you and I had this issue. I think it was last week when we were recording, we had an email we didn't know how to respond to. And we both knew how we should respond. And we both had the same intuitive gut feeling, but we were like, let's just ask Britney what she thinks. And Britney just echoed what both of us were feeling. We're like, fine.
Yeah. I also think that sometimes there can be this level, or this is something that I experience. I don't know if you'll relate or if anyone listening will relate, but I can almost feel this like weird scarcity mentality around pulling cards where it's like, I feel like I need to wait for a big enough problem. I need to wait to have a good enough question.
Yeah.
For it to be worth pulling cards. And that's just not the case. That's something that I do a constant work to move through.
Yeah. I as you're talking, I'm thinking of like the personalities of my deck. And the Akashic Tarot is very much like akin to my mentor, like someone that I look up to that I would ask this question to, you know, like my mentor in energy healing or in yoga or meditation or whatever. The Britney deck is like you.
I almost said that.
The person that I can both ask really deep, heavy, important questions, but also really light questions. And you'll always kind of like tell me the answer I already know.
Yeah. I love that comparison.
It's the Madison of Oracle decks.
Yeah.
So
highly recommend. Jinx. Yeah, I think that same for me, like my Rider-Waite Smith deck, I can come to it with anything, but there is a level of like, if I know the answer, I'm going to get some sass with it.
Yeah.
It's no one's ever going to withhold information from me, but it's the energy with which I get that information that I'll sometimes pick and choose with who I'm going to work with. My next deck is, sadly, I don't believe is in print any longer. It's the Magical Mermaids and Dolphins Oracle deck by Doreen Virtue, who I think this is no longer in print because I think that she went back to Christianity and like renounced all of her creations. What? She's made like a bunch of decks. I don't know if I heard that. I should maybe have Googled it before we started recording, but I just love this deck. I found it at a used bookstore. And so if I'm wrong and they're all still at Barnes & Noble or wherever they were, you know, I don't even know who publishes them or published them. If you see them in the Healing Hedgewood shop, you'll know that they are actually still in print. And I maybe made that story up. But I bought it at a used bookstore in Sedona, Arizona.
Mm.
And I got it because there's a fairy on the front. And that's like, fairies are, I feel very connected to them. And I love them and I see them.
You are a fairy.
I am a fairy. And I see them and they feel like a sign to me, like that I'm on the right path when I see them in the wild. And so my mom and I were in Sedona because there's a huge gem show in Tucson, Arizona, which is where we go and pick our crystals for the store. And so we just took a little road trip to Sedona earlier this year. Found this deck and then another one. My mom got that one and they slept with me in my hotel room. And these were actually the first decks. It's funny that you brought up the casino. This was the first time I ever used imagery from an oracle deck to gamble. And now it's become my thing. I'm not a huge gambler, and I don't know why I talk so much about it on this podcast. You would think that I'm at the casino every weekend. I'm really not. It's like 3 times, but every time it's been a spiritual experience in some fashion. And so I have to talk about it here. But the first time that ever happened, we went from Sedona to Las Vegas for a different wholesale show. It was a busy January this year. And my mom and I just like very silly pulled decks, and now it's my tradition.
I love that.
But that's really why I love this deck. It is a similar kind of thing as what you were talking about, where there's a little written message as well. And so you don't always have to go looking in the book for what it means. You can take that sentence and kind of interpret it with your intuitive message. And I just love a fairy and I love a mermaid. I love a little creature. And I think it just sparks a lot of like childlike joy in me. And so I don't want to say this is my gambling deck because it's not, but that's the joke that I would make. I just pull this out whenever I'm looking for any kind of imagery, really, because it has a lot of like really robust, interesting images that if I'm looking for a sign, I'll pull it from here.
That's wild because that's exactly why I used this last deck on my list.
No way.
Yeah. So this is the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck that was so kindly gifted to me from the team at Calm many, many moons ago.
Thanks, Calm.
Calm, if you're listening and you want me to do a meditation on your app, hit me up. But I'm going to tell you why I love this deck and why I don't use it. So I love this deck because it's all animal imagery. And so oftentimes, like when I'm doing sessions for people, animal imagery will come up. Either I see animals or they see animals or whatever. I also will use it as like if I'm seeing like a dragonfly was the top card. And there was one summer where I saw dragonflies everywhere. And so I just looked up what that meant. But I don't use it for readings because I find the guidebook to be really, really annoying. It's not alphabetized and there's no table of contents.
Oh, I don't like that.
So, yeah. So, and it's separated by like, there's these little symbols on each of the cards. That means like a winged creature versus a 4-legged creature versus like, I don't even know what the other two are, but I always forget what they mean. And so I have to spend like 10 minutes flipping through the book to find each card. So it's just really annoying to do a spread with them. Otherwise, I would probably use it more, but I mostly pull this for signs, symbolism, and when a specific sign keeps coming up, either for someone else or for myself.
Yeah. I love that. That's a really good deck for that too. Like animals are a really easy sign,
Yeah.
My last deck is actually also an animal deck. You've heard it on the pod if you've been listening for a little while, the Animal Apothecary deck by Cara Elizabeth. It's an oracle deck that I pull exclusively when I don't want to work too hard, is my truth. And that's because the opposite of your animal deck, this guidebook is incredible.
It's so good. You made me buy it.
It is
I almost included it, but I knew you were going to include it, so I included my other animal deck.
It is
my favorite.
So beautiful. The imagery is so beautiful. The guidebook is so poignant that
the cards are numbered.
Very easy. And I don't know I think that like just the relationship that I have with this deck is I know that it's here to teach me. And it kind of shuts down my ego. Like, I have moments with it where there's nothing that the imagery could pull forth for me that is better than what this person has written. It is incredible. And so when I just need a message, it's also like very uplifting, even in the cards that like are quote unquote bad, which I don't believe that that's true about any card in a deck, but you know what I mean. Like The cards that aren't saying everything's perfect and you're going to be amazing and you're going to be the president. Like, even those cards are really uplifting in a way that is very helpful when I need a push. And so when I just need somebody to tell me something that is going to make me feel good, and I don't want to have to sit and sort through a message that's coming through for me psychically, I pull from this deck. Because every time I read, it's like, most of the time in the guidebook, it's like a story from folklore about an animal. And it's always exactly what I need. And it's just, I just love it so much. It is such a beautiful deck.
See, I love it because the first card I ever pulled referenced a scientific study that I had not heard of.
Oh, I remember you talking to me about this.
I don't even remember what card it was, but it sent me down a rabbit hole that I really enjoyed. And as you're talking, I was like, you know what the personality of that deck is?
Tell me.
This podcast.
Aw, that was very tender.
Because it's like, well, a lot of times I pull cards and there's like a little bit of a sciencey lean or a reference to psychology or how the brain works. But then there's also this spiritual element to it. And it's also very uplifting. And it's also, I feel like I haven't pulled every single card. I haven't worked with it as much as you have. But I just feel like that deck constantly circles me back to me. And empowers me to make choices in my life, which not every deck does.
I think that is why I love it so much too, is that it feels very aligned. And I think that's part of why I just get to shut up and listen, you know, because I'm not having to sort through and pick out what resonates. Yeah. It is so deeply aligned with what is important to me. That's a really lovely comparison.
And it's really good storytelling too.
Yes, she's an incredible writer.
I mean, this is no surprise to anyone listening, but I love a spiritual lesson that can be wrapped up in a short story. That's where most of my analogies come from, is a lot of my spiritual teachers teach in stories. So then I think in stories and I think in analogies. And so I feel like for me, it helps the information land more. Maybe I should have put that at the top. I got to pull that one out. It's on my altar right now. So I built an altar, folks. I built a full-size altar.
Molly has gone full witch, and it is glorious. I'm living my best life right now.
I'm living my best life right now. Anything else you want to say about decks?
Yeah, you want to finish off with, like, what's your one biggest piece of advice for someone looking for a deck? What would you boil it all down to?
Don't overthink it and have fun.
Love that.
Because I think I'm always in my head. I'm always like, you know, comparing myself to tarot readers. I don't consider myself to be a tarot reader. I don't consider myself to be a card reader. I don't know if I'm never going to say never, but I don't see myself doing like exclusively card readings for people. But I do love them as a tool. Like you and I were talking before we hit record, but tarot decks, cards, they're just a tool to help you connect with your intuition ultimately. Like, don't let them be a cloud over that. And a lot of times that cloud can come when we are taking it too seriously or we're comparing ourselves to other people or what we think we quote unquote should be like. What's yours?
Release your feeling of urgency. It's okay if it takes time. Something that was really important to us when we built the store is having a space where you are allowed to just be and you're allowed to just piddle. Find a store that has an open deck, that you can touch the cards, that you can look at the imagery, and a place where you feel safe to sit down and look and touch base with your intuition. Don't feel like you need to have something right now. If you feel called to something, you know exactly what it is, you know exactly what you want, get it. You know, I'm not saying ignore that feeling, but if you don't know what you feel connected to, if you're looking for that feeling of connection, allow it to come in its own time.
I love that.
All right. I think we might have done it.
All right. We did it. This is our last episode of the year.
That's wild.
Is it? It's been a great year. Thank you for demystifying magic with us.
Yeah. I can't wait to do it all year long next year.
Hey, yo. Until next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Demystify Magic with Molly and Madison. If you want to learn more about us, you can find all our links in the show notes.
We'd love to know what you think of today's episode, so drop us a review or give us a shout out on social media. And don't forget to let us know your magical moment of the week. Okay, love you. Bye.